Hi. Sales, increasing sales, profitable sales, quotas, performance are all things that most business owners and perhaps business professionals deal with all the time. I've asked Steve Weinberg to sit in on a session because I think the book that he's just written is much more than a book. I think it's a resource document that most of us can benefit greatly from. First, I'd like to welcome Steve. Glad that you're here. Nice to see you again.
Thank you, Paul. I'm glad to be here.
My partner, Joel Goldberg, has spoken highly of Steve, and we're going to learn a little bit more about his background and his credentials. But the essence of what we're going to be covering will be how to successfully sell. And there's one quote that struck me right from the beginning. You know, aside from the 6 pages of endorsements from business professionals that were extremely impressive at the forward of this, struck me from the beginning. As simple and as straightforward as it is, it rung a really loud bell. Knowing how to sell and motivating those that sell with you is to conquer the most challenging role in a corporation. That was a paraphrase of what Steve has written in his book. Steve, tell us about you. Tell us about your sales and your background and why you've written a book.
Okay, well, I started out in accounting, and I am a CPA, and I was in accounting for about 10 years, and I worked for a corporation. They asked me to implement some accounting software packages, and I did that, including a fixed asset accounting package from a company called McCormick & Dodge, which had just started out. They were a very, very small company. They offered me a position in sales, which was very different from my whole background. I would never had a sales class or never thought of myself of going into sales, but they offered me a class or offered me a job to sell their software, which I knew was good. So I thought, well, this is going to be really easy to to sell this in the marketplace. So I moved back to Chicago, which is where I was from, and started out as one of their few salespeople. And over time, I was their #1 sales rep every year. Then I became a regional manager, hired a lot of salespeople, then became VP of sales. The company was then acquired by Dun & Bradstreet. And later, Dun & Bradstreet moved me over to Nielsen. And subsequently, I worked for several other software companies and data companies as VP of sales, and also as a president of one software company.
Excellent. Wonderful. Very, very good. The keys, some of the comments that struck me right from the beginning. When you were in selling and you evolved over many, many years, you've come to the conclusion that 50% of salespeople in and around you, maybe working for you before you got there, do not reach quotas. Why is that?
That's a startling number, isn't it?
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, I when I first started researching that at the beginning of my book, I found really credible resources that estimated that number at anywhere from 46% to 60%. So I being an accountant, I'm conservative, so I picked 50%, and I use that number. But when you think about it, to me, well, there's 2 things that are really kind of amazing. One is that number is real, and the second is that companies have accepted that. Now, to answer your question, why is that? If you ask the 50% that didn't make it, they would tell you their quota is too high. Very simple. That's why they didn't make it, right?
And their commission is too low, right?
Right, yeah. So, and maybe they would tell you they don't get enough leads. That's another answer that you would get from them. But the reality is that if 50% don't make it, that means 50% did make it. Yeah. So most times the quotas are really realistic. And if you look and say, okay, why didn't somebody make their quota? I would say there are a lot of reasons. One is perhaps the onboarding process was deficient. I find that salespeople waste a lot of time on calling on prospects that'll never buy. Some of them don't understand where what I call a sweet spot. They don't understand where they should be looking for new business, and they chase business outside of that. Some of them, I mean, just don't qualify their leads. As I said, they go after others. I think the communication between the salespeople and prospects needs improvement in most cases today. I think a big reason is that salespeople don't understand value proposition and what a prospect is looking for. They call on them and they say, you know, you should buy from us. Well, why should I buy from us? Well, we've got a good product. It's really good, you know, but they never explain what it does for them. What's in it for them if they do buy it? So they really don't connect the dots on that. I think that's a big reason.
What are some of the things that you've done to deal with that? I find that to be a very, very familiar and common area. What do you do to change that or to deal with it?
When I held account reviews for salespeople, they were very detailed, grueling sessions. But what I would say to them is I would say, like, you know, this particular account, why are they buying? And they would say, what do you mean, why are they buying? Well, why are you there? Why are they giving you any time? What is their reason for looking for something? What do they have right now? Why doesn't it work? Who's driving this decision? Do they have a budget? Do they have an executive sponsor? So a lot of times they didn't know any of this. So I'd say, well, how are you doing on this account? And they would say, well, I think I'm going to win it. I go, well, why do you think you're going to win it? And they would say, well, because they're nice to me. Okay. And I go, really? They're nice to you? Oh, yeah. Whenever I call, they take my calls. And when I ask them questions, they give me answers. And, you know, they've been really nice to work with. Oh, well, you know, when was the last time you spoke with them? Well, it's been about 2 weeks. Okay. Well, where are they in your sales process? Well, I'm not exactly sure. What's the next step? Okay. What's the next step? Well, I'm waiting for them to get back to me. And, you know, I would push them hard. And then the answer usually was that the salesperson didn't know what I call the real why, the WHY, the real why, not the letter Y, but the reason why they were even there. Why are they even spending any time with you? Why are they talking to you? And I would say more than half the time they didn't know.
And isn't it true that once they get past the niceness, the welcomeness, the comfort, the familiarity, all of a sudden the prospective customer is raising an objection, a concern, or a doubt? Doesn't that oftentimes turn the salesperson numb when they don't know how to answer or reply to an objection?
Well, that's, you know, you brought up a subject that I'm very passionate about, which is objections. But salespeople, for the most part, are trained to counter objections, right? So when they have their sales meeting every year, they usually bring in a sales trainer, and the sales trainer says to them, okay, if your prospect says this, then you say this. And if they say this, then you say this. If they say the price is too high, your answer is no, it's not too high. Okay. So you have all these set answers and you do all these role plays, and then the sales trainer leaves, right? And so the next time the salesperson's in front of a prospect, and there are two kinds of objections, the ones that are heard and the ones that are not heard. And the ones that are not heard are actually far more dangerous. So the salesperson hears someone say, you know, well, what about this? And then the salesperson gets very defensive, right? So that's when, to me, a lot of times the sale goes off the rails. In my mind, and what I wrote in the book is that salespeople should welcome objections. Objections are information. Objections are the blueprint to help you sell. Objections are, you don't need to counter them, you need to understand them and you need to appreciate them.
Yes.
So, you know, where are they coming from? And in my mind, when someone didn't voice an objection, I would bring them up. I would say to them, is my price too high? Okay. Are you okay with my delivery date? Have I shown you how this can help you solve your problem? So I would bring these things up and actually ask them to validate what I've been explaining to them. I would say, well, can you please explain to me how you think this will be of value to you?
Good.
And then the hidden objections, a lot of times people, I think 90% of the people that we deal with in the business world are nice people, and they don't want to hurt your feelings. So if you're in front of them and you're explaining something and they don't like it, they just keep their mouth shut and they just kind of go along with it. And you leave at the end of the day and you don't know that what you've just demonstrated to them or spoke to them about won't meet their needs. But then as soon as you walk out the door, they all look at each other and say, no, we're not going to buy that. So how do you find that information out? You ask, right? So it's,
A bold
that's how you
question.
work with objections.
Will you give me the sale? Some people are just simply afraid to ask for the order. Is that not true?
Yes, there are people that don't like bad news, right?
Yes.
So they don't want to be told they're losing. They don't want to be told that, that maybe their product won't meet the needs that they have. And so they avoid that. And so what happens with that? The salesperson keeps calling on this customer. They've already lost, they just don't know it. And they keep calling on them and calling on them. And the people are nice to the salesperson. And then a couple of months later, they get what I call the butt call, B-U-T, the butt call, which is, Steve, you're really a nice guy. We really like working with you. Okay. But, okay. But we decided to go with your competitor. Now, if the salesperson knew that months ago, they could have devoted that same time to finding another prospect or company that was maybe more suited to what they had. And they wouldn't have wasted that time, which was very unproductive then.
What's happened, Steve, to change this, affect what you're just talking about with the pandemic? If people are cagey or pulling back and delay the butt call for weeks, perhaps, or days, how has the pandemic affected the results of salespeople, good, average, or poor salespeople?
The pandemic has really made sales a whole lot more difficult because, and I did write about this well over a year ago. It changed everything because before the pandemic, in many cases, the salesperson could have face-to-face access to a contact, to a team of people, to the decision maker. Or at the worst case, they could have a telephone conversation with them. Once the pandemic hit, the access was totally cut off. And if the salesperson was lucky, they could get a Zoom call. And a Zoom call was generally very limited. You don't see the body language. You don't appreciate a lot of the information that you don't receive a lot of information that you would get face to face with someone. You don't build the relationship. You don't build the trust. And definitely the time that you have in front of the prospect is limited. And I read one study that said that right now the salespeople are getting about 7% of the time that they used to get before. And also, when they get involved with the prospect, is farther along in the sales cycle. So in the pre-pandemic, they would meet with people and discuss their needs even before they developed a budget or whatever. They just go out to lunch, have a cup of coffee, and discuss things. Well, the pandemic ended all that. There's no going out to lunch. There's no cup of coffee. So everything is now just strictly business as occurs. And that means the project team the decision team has probably been meeting quite a while before the salesperson was even contacted. And it just made it much more difficult for salespeople today than it was before the pandemic.
Having said that, and all of us having experienced the pandemic, the area in I believe it's chapter 24 of your book, you've outlined some of the most amazing observations and characteristics of successful and qualified salespeople. Now you put a pandemic barrier, another barrier.
Right.
It was like the old days in chasing smokestacks, trying to get a relationship, trying to get a face-to-face. What covers some of the most prominent, familiar, and appealing characteristics of successful salespeople for us?
It's what, I hired people that I thought were very qualified people. And then when they didn't make it, I always thought, well, why didn't they make it? So I studied this a lot. And I also saw some really top performing salespeople, including myself, but other people. And I thought, well, why are these people doing so well? Because there definitely is an 80-20 rule. 20% of your sales, or 80% of your salespeople will, 80% of your sales revenue will come from 20% of your people. So what is it about these 20%? What I found was, first of all, they're very dissimilar. They're, I thought, well, if I could, I have this one guy and he's really good. So if I hire a bunch of people like this guy, they'll all be good. Well, that didn't work. Okay. And then I compared the high achievers, and they were very dissimilar in their styles, how they sold, how they presented, how they worked, their habits, totally dissimilar. So what I came to the conclusion of really was that salespeople are like eagles. They like to be by themselves. They like to hunt by themselves. And if you ask a really high performing salesperson what their best manager is, they will tell you their best manager is one that they never hear from. So, they like to do that. So now I drill down and I say, okay, now why would these people do better than other people? And what I found there were a number of key indicators. Number one was that they had much more empathy for the customer or prospect. They wanted to help them out. They didn't want to be a hit and run salesperson. Those people can be successful in the short run, but never in the long run.
Yes.
They wanted to build a trust relationship with them. They wanted to bring value to the customer in terms of information that the customer or prospect didn't already have. So they wanted to be thought of as a subject matter expert, someone that could add value to not only the conversation, but help them out in their careers. I think business acumen is really important. They needed to understand how this company made, how do they make money? Like I would ask a salesman when they come in, I'd say, well, who are you calling on? And they would tell me, and I'd say, well, how do they make money? What's their business? Well, they sell this. And I go, well, yeah, but how do they make money? Okay, where's their profit coming from? It's like, let's say, I'll just use Walgreens as an example. You say, well, how does Walgreens make money? Okay, well, you go in the store and you buy their products, right? No, Walgreens makes money from the pharmacy. Okay, the other things are to bring you in the store, right? So that, something like 80% of their profits come out of the pharmacy. So, but you need to know this when you're calling on people.
And that leads them to usually performing in above quota performance, correct?
Right.
What got you to title your book Above Quota Performance?
Well, actually, I had another title for it, but the publisher came up with that one. But my title was, If You're Not Winning, You're Losing. And they thought that was negative. And my idea behind it was, again, when you're talking to the salespeople, if they couldn't convince me that they were winning a deal, that meant they were losing the deal. That meant they were doing that. But I now feel better about the title. I love the cover photo, the cover design that they made, the publisher made. But the whole idea here is that I want to help salespeople. I've seen a lot of people struggle. I've seen the consequences of people not reaching quota. Those consequences run anywhere from, at the minimum, someone being put on a plan that they have to achieve, which they usually don't, to being terminated. I've seen families being broken up. I've seen people lose their homes, and I've seen even in one case a suicide because somebody didn't reach their quotas. So if I can help people that are in the bottom 50% become steady achievers, I will consider that the book was a success. I also want to help those that are making quota even do better. I want them to understand that there's things that they can do. If they're 110% of quota, they could be 150, they could be 200% of quota.
As I read several sections of your book, as a business owner of several businesses in my career, it became very, very clear to me that what you've outlined in the book, as far as the characteristics and all of the other segments that just snapped together in the content of the book, is really an effective resource document for the owner of a business or the owner of a startup business. You're going to be relying on profitable sales forever. There's never a period that you're going to stop selling with any great end result. So the owner, the salespeople, the people who are managing the salespeople, and the corporation itself could very well benefit from the perspective that you presented here.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. It was also written in a way that it's like a guidebook where people don't have to read it sequentially from chapter 1 till the end. They can select out.
Right.
If, for example, someone says, well, Steve wrote about using LinkedIn to develop leads. I want to learn more about that. So they could just go right to that chapter and dig into that and, get to the others whenever they feel like it.
Yes, absolutely. And our viewer, get a hold of your book, Above Quota Performance. And I'd love saying that. It's an interesting title. I won't forget it. How can they find your book, and where may they find it?
Well, the book is for sale on Amazon. It's also at Barnes and Noble and Books A Million. And I also found out last week it's even for sale at Walmart.com.
Wow.
Or if they go to my website, which is www.steveweinbergsales, that's STEVEWEINBERG, sales, one word.com. There are links in my website to the different retailers where they could also order my book.
Great. I'm delighted that you've spent time with me today and conveyed to our viewers the insights based on the wealth of your experience. Whether it's the beginning of a year, the middle of a year, or the end of a year, the challenge of profitable sales will be with every business owner and every sales manager, wherever they're located. Thank you for being with us, and thank you, viewers, for listening, watching to us. Look again. I'm hoping to convince Steve to visit with us again soon, to drill down perhaps a little bit further from the pages of his vast resource book, Above Quota Performance. Thanks for listening, and we'll...
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Nice to see you. Thank you all, and Happy New Year. Bye for now.